And then a little more closely, you'll see these yellow pins, or blue flags. Those are sites that we marked as suspicious. And so we take that information and we blow it up more closely on Google Earth, and then we can actually, here's a suspicious tree, actually, and you can see we're flying by this, we spotted the tree, and we're able to fly right over the tree. That's the nice thing about a helicopter. I mean, you can go right to the tree. And this is just another example. Here's some suspicious trees here, the blue or yellow flags. And again, we saw it, we were flying this way, saw it, and just honed in on it. So what does it look like? This is sort of what it looks like as you're flying around up there. And really the joke is, I don't like heights, and I have a really poor sense of direction, so who do they put in the helicopter? I'm the one up in the helicopter. Without any doors on the helicopter. It's like, this is really what I want to do. Anyway, we're trying to find somebody else to take my place. Believe me, I'll be glad to train them anytime. But, so for instance, here's a grove, and it's a little hard to see from back there. I'm sure. How's this thing? Okay. So you can spot there's a little brown area in this grove, and you can get a little closer, right here actually, and closer, and there we are, standing up like a flag. And so then we fly over that and mark it on the GPS system. And this is just an example. Here's another grove, and you can see this tree is showing symptoms, stress symptoms. So they're pretty easy to spot, at least at this time of year. Also, we're able to get close enough to trees that we knew this was probably not a suspect for Laurel wilt. Because when we got close enough, you could see the branches were broken, and this had to do with an excessively high fruit load. So we didn't mark it. But it's just an example to show you. So we can really look at the trees quite carefully if we need to. And then again, here's some more suspicious trees here that were located in this grove here. And just again, here it is. Here's the tree here. We saw it from a distance and then flew right to it. So what we've done is these are the dates that we have flown this first survey. These are the quadrants. These are the number of suspects that we pushed, that we thought people should go look at these trees. And this is the time it took to do this. So it took about 7 hours to do a 275 square mile area. And it cost us about $3,600 to do this survey. So what are some of the control options if it turns out you do have a positive tree? And we haven't found, out of all those samples that I showed you that the growers have been taking, I can't say that every grove, every tree has been sampled that we think should be at this moment, although that's in progress. So far, they've all come back negative for Laurel wilt. But what are some of the control options? So if you have a positive, severely declining tree, I mean a tree that's really hammered, some of the options are to cut the tree, chip it, and tarp it, or cut, chip, and burn. And you have to get a burn permit before you start lighting fires in your grove. And also, another option is cut, chip, and bury the wood, or cut, chip, and compost the wood. However, you can only chip wood up to about 4 or 5 inches. So that leaves some large pieces of wood that could be the host, or actually have beetles inside of it. So with that, we suggest they either be burned or buried or somehow destroyed. And then also, if you leave a stump, we've seen where people have cut trees and then the beetles will attack at the base of the stump. So you need some way to either ground out the stump or paint it with a poison or pruning paint or tar, something that's going to hopefully inhibit the stump from resprouting, but also inhibit the beetle from using it as a site to produce more beetles. But if you happen to find trees with early symptoms, so they've just started wilting, so early detection. So trees not showing dramatic symptoms and that still have, somewhat of a live or have a live canopy, maybe you can treat with a soil drench of imidacloprid to kill any of the beetles that are inside of it. or remove only of the affected limbs down to non-symptomatic wood, and then cover that surface area either with a pruning tar or paint, and then destroy the affected limbs. These are just a list of some of the materials that are registered for avocado, and as Dr. Pena mentioned, he has found several other materials that appear to be more efficacious. They're not registered for avocado right now, so we will probably go for a Section 18, and we've already started the process of trying to get them a Section 3 label. Some more control options, adjacent avocado trees. So it's possible that adjacent avocado trees not showing symptoms, again, maybe a soil drench with Admire or imidacloprid would kill any beetles that may be inside those trees. Another option would be to make a late afternoon foliar application of a contact insecticide to try to kill any flying beetles and also beetles that land on the bark. However, I want to be clear, we're not advocating spraying groves unless a positive tree for Laurel wilt is found. And again, we're not necessarily advocating that if you have a 40-acre grove and you find one tree that you go out and spray all 40 acres. That you spray around where that positive was found and then you intensify your scouting. And it's certainly not sustainable to be applying insecticides 365 days to try to cover a year period. So it's not environmentally useful and it's not going to be economically feasible. And as Randy mentioned, he's found that with trees with a relatively thin bark, usually less than 7 years old in our environment, we do have an emergency exemption for the use of tilt. And that you can use this material with a pentrabark substance that helps materials move through the bark and do a trunk and limb spray, and that this does seem to get enough material into the tree to provide some protection. We just don't know the frequency of application that would be necessary to protect those young trees. With the more mature trees, let's say over 7 years, at this moment, we really don't know an effective treatment. We know of at least 3 compounds that will control the disease, but how to get it into the tree in an efficacious way, in an economic way, we don't know yet. As I mentioned, we do have an emergency exemption for tilt, but again, there's some issues with this procedure and with the material, so we're not recommending it right now. Okay, but we have observed that macroinfusion of this material with mature trees hasn't shown any phytotoxicity, but again, there's so many unknowns that we're really not recommending it, especially since the economics of it seem to be doubtful. Pruning practices, as I mentioned before, this is one of the issues that people have, is that, how can I prune my trees? Because we generally prune every year, some people every other year, but pruning has to take place. We need to control the size of our trees. And so the research of the entomologists suggests that recently cut surfaces of avocado are more attractive to the beetle than non-cut surfaces, as I mentioned. We also know from the entomologists that the beetle does bore into the bark and through the cut ends of limbs. So if you have a cut surface, the beetle will bore into that cut end. So it is assumed that cutting increases the release of the attractive volatiles naturally produced by the trees. And so this is the issue. You go in, you prune your tree, and now you've made it more attractive. So where and when possible, we're suggesting prune during the late fall and winter when the beetle activity is depressed. As I mentioned before, remember, and Jorge had shown, beetle activity during the winter time, late fall and winter, is much less than late summer, and as it rises during the spring. So this may be an appropriate strategy mostly for mid and late season avocados rather than the early season avocados. The other suggestion is to prune groves early in the morning and apply a contact insecticide with residual activity to cover the cut surfaces during the late afternoon, early evening. And then there's a number of materials, and Jorge has found some other materials that we're going to suggest people use. So, the control strategies in the commercial groves, the idea is to reduce the beetle population in the commercial groves and suppress the spread of Laurel wilt. The key components, scouting, identifying whether you actually have laurel wilt or not,